All right. I've called this talk Evolving DevOps, and it's part of a topic or a series of talks that I give called Accessible Continuous Integration. And I don't have a lot of time tonight to actually go into what that is, but in its core, it's basically about trying to integrate people into the process of CI and DevOps. And on my title slide here, I have a little Drupal DevOps ninja that, slays everything. Slay, slay, slay. So I thought that was perfect for, kind of the gist of this talk. Yeah. All right. So who am I? I'm Nerdstein on Drupal.org. I also go by Adam, whatever your preference is. I'm the Associate Director of Engineering at Civic Actions, and we're a fully distributed company. I actually live in Pennsylvania, so I'm not too far, and I would have come down, except, hey, we've got a little bit of weather. And I have a Master's of Science from Penn State University. The topics was Information Systems and Security. Pretty fun. And I'm the Drupal 8 maintainer of a bunch of different modules, even with other people: services, taxonomy, menu, password policy, key, encrypt, field encrypt, file encrypt, and much more. So what do I want to... What's that, Stan? Cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I know I know that Stelline also was really heavily involved with that, and he helped bring me on for helping out with the 8 version. So yeah, happy to do it. So I'm going to give a brief outline of what I want to talk about. First, I assume that you know what DevOps actually is. I'm not going to go into that. I don't have a lot of time this evening, so I assume you have kind of the basic idea of it and can relate to some of the high-level material. First, we're going to explore some problems that are in the DevOps space. We're going to look at conventional wisdom and how they're solved today, how we can evolve those, and how we seek awesome outcomes. And I can leave some time for discussion as needed. First and foremost, one does not simply listen to Phil Collins in the air tonight and not play the air drums. That is so fitting for this talk, because you cannot do web development professionally and not want to make your DevOps rock. Anymore, if you are a true professional, you really need to be doing DevOps constantly. You need to be an expert, and you need to constantly be evolving and thinking about ways that you can make your DevOps stronger. So what are some of the problems that, the classical problems that we see in the world, and what we've done about them? Well, first we have quality assurance. So you want QA baked into your DevOps, because if you don't have any quality, you're never going to inspire confidence in what you're building. So you need to make sure that whatever process you put in place, the quality is your first and foremost objective. And Aristotle said this best. He said, quality is not an act, it is a habit. So that habit that you build, you basically want to make sure that it is fully baked into your practice and that you do it consistently and religiously. Release management is another problem that is, pretty popular in the DevOps space, and we're going to explore some things to make that a little easier. But, really, you should be releasing early. You should be releasing often. You should keep your releases small, and releases themselves should have well-defined steps and any kind of automation that you may want to make sure that it's done consistently. Which leads me to the next bullet: automation. Automation is a problem that people have been attempting to solve for years and years and years and years. And that is a really key cog in the big DevOps wheel, to try to get your process automated and running super smoothly. So as the Queen often says, keep calm and automate all the things. The automation is one of the key things of continuous learning, and continuous learning is the foundation of DevOps. So if you fall down, you need to be dreaming up a way to try to automate it so that you solve that problem now and forever. One of the keys about this is that if you have consistency with your DevOps, it's going to yield predictability. You're never going to be having these crazy things come up unless if they're new problems. And automation is one way to do that. But overall, you need to strive to make sure that you are promoting consistency. And that consistency affords you a baseline that you have to work from and a place that you can brainstorm on improvements. In the Drupal ecosystem, we have something called a content master, but that's really akin for saying that we have a bunch of different systems and environments that have known and distinct roles. And if you don't have roles in your environments like a content master or a development server or staging server, you need to make sure that you are defining them. And this is what you need to make sure that it is clear what different systems in your environment is doing, how they serve your process, and what you might need to adjust moving forward. Client involvement. So this is really about the accessible continuous integration term that I coined. And that's really the best means of getting users involved in your process, in your DevOps, in your CI, all of that. And I will claim that the sooner your clients are involved, the better. You're going to catch things that they were expecting, they didn't know how to communicate, but you need to make sure that they are involved and vetted in your process. And the last problem that I forgot to, oh, sorry, I've got a meme for you. This is the first time I gave the talk, so sorry, it's a little clunky. This is me hugging my clients. Come give me a hug, bro. I love that. All right. The last problem that we're going to describe here is the infrastructure parity. And this is really cool because a lot of people, I've seen struggle with this in the past. If you don't really have any sort of consistency in your environments, and that also includes your local sandboxes, you can, in essence, deploy things that would bomb, right? So because each environment could be different or could be staged a different way. So let's take a look at conventional wisdom of how DevOps tries to solve some of these issues right now. First and foremost, we have dev, stage, and prod, and each one of these environments do different things. Dev, is usually used for integration testing, smoke testing. Staging is used for client sign-off, and production is production. You don't really touch it. Unless if you are pushing well-vetted code. But each of these environments do different things. And, what does this try to solve, though? Well, you never push code directly to prod. It is super, super dangerous, and you're going to run the risk of pushing code that hasn't been well-tested if you just, willy-nilly push code up. So definitely don't do that. And the conventional model for looking at, DevOps workflows is code up and content down. Basically that you have branches of code and that gets pushed through from development and staging and production with different approvals in between. And that's tested against content from prod. It looks a little bit like this, where you have Drupal's database and files start from prod and work their way down to staging and dev. And you have code that gets initially deployed to dev, pushes its way up to staging, and pushes its way up to prod. So in this case, prod is serving as our content master in this instance because everything flows back down, but all the code, as it is tested, gets deployed up. So we have the idea of local sandboxes too, because really we don't want any sort of development to be occurring on any server because we can't work in parallel. Teams would be constantly pushing code to dev and things would break and it would be really chaotic. So we want different sandboxes on each developer's machines to be able to do code that can be pushed up throughout the environments. And currently we make use of code repositories in a review process. So we have a Git code repository or something like that. We create branches per work stream, and we perform peer reviews through pull requests. So that is today. That is what happens with that. And lastly, we do batch releases. So with batch releases, we basically take a whole bunch of these branches and we merge them into master, and that gets pushed up, throughout the environments with a tag or something like that. It goes to stage, and then we have a release candidate to test, and that gets pushed up to prod or something along those lines. It looks a little something like this, where we have a default branch, and that's where all of our good code is. We have milestones on the develop branch where we have these little orange objects. And we have these feature branches where we have different commits and then they get rolled back into one or more um, release candidates on the develop branch. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that's pretty much what people do today in the most part from what I see. But what about automation? So we haven't really spent any time talking about the current practices around automation. The current practices really do involve a lot with Jenkins serving as like a continuous integration layer that runs scripts and tasks over SSH into the environments. And we use a tool like Drush to build the scripts. And Drush basically helps perform the different operations that we want, whether that's a feature revert or a cache clear or an updb if we're changing the schema on an environment. But that's how we perform our deployments and our releases, and we do all of the things that we basically want to codify and automate and put that into a task runner like Jenkins. So we have basically gotten through most of where we are today, but let's look and see. We have our known problems, and we've already developed some tools, but they're not flawless. So where are they heading, and what can we do to make them even slicker? The first thing is we should explore the use of disposable environments. So on-demand environments help where if you're coding in a specific branch, you can create an environment for that branch. And then when the branch is destroyed or it gets merged in after it's been tested, you throw that environment away when the branch is deleted, and it's done. And so this actually helps to avoid the concept of a batch, because every single piece of work can get its own environment for every work stream that you're doing. And then once it's all vetted and ready to go, you can merge in that branch into the main code branch, but only after it's been vetted. So you're not pushing a large chunk of work, you're pushing a much smaller one. Infrastructure automation. So I'm pretty sure that Jeff Geerling was your recent, he presented here recently on Drupal VM. Is that true? Okay, cool. So he is like a total thought leader in the Drupal community around infrastructure automation. Drupal VM is built on Ansible, and any tool like Ansible or Puppet or Chef can help to serve as an automation layer for doing your infrastructure. And why is this useful? Well, if you're looking to rapidly deploy environments by branch, you need a way to script the infrastructure and setting it up so that your provisioning can happen in a consistent way. So a tool like Ansible, Puppet, or Chef help to do that, which is great. Remote sandboxes. So I can't see anyone in the crowd, but I can't imagine that you're anything outside of what I've experienced before. And setting up sandboxes across a team is one of the most painful activities ever. Some people have Mac, some people have Windows, some people use Linux. I have a coworker that actually uses a Chromebook. And one of these things that is really super, super painful is just every single machine is different, and this is a huge pain point. So what if you actually can use remote sandboxes? What if you replace your local environment with building on a disposable environment? So the minute that you create a branch, it'll replace, instead of doing the work on your sandbox, all you do is you set up your IDE, you push code with Git, and then it goes up to a cloud environment that spins up for you. I like that idea a lot more. It sounds a lot easier. Repository hooks. So I'm sure most people try to use, PHP-CS and things in Drupal, or they scan for, blacklisted words like DPM, that you don't want to commit up through. And you could use repository hooks for doing a lot of the same types of things, right? If we're using a branch-based strategy, you could check those events and populate, the creation of an environment, or do different things about, the provisioning or anything else that you want to do within a repository hook. And those things are super useful, I think, in this evolution discussion, because a repository is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used in this conversation. So key thing here is you best verify thyself before you destroy thyself. So this is useful for the branch level strategy, and whenever you set up your hooks in your repository, you can actually have another hook that whenever you are done working and you destroy your branch, it goes and removes your environment. But that should only be after you do some thorough testing, not only by a peer, but also from a client to get sign off. All right, so enhanced backlog usage. So the backlog, or, I don't know, some folks call it differently if you're not doing Agile, but the backlog basically maintains all your different work streams. And for your backlog, if you use it a certain way, you can actually afford some really cool benefits. So the branch names can correspond to a different ticket number or a different work stream specification. And that can be super useful, I think, for organizing things appropriately. And if you tag something with the same ticket number that's in the backlog, you can perform a ton of automation at that point. So you could put the created environment directly into a ticket, using a hook. You could create developers should create a series of QA steps. And so basically, once that ticket flows through and gets assigned for peer review or for client sign off, you have a full environment already ready to go, and it has the steps that people need to test that. That's right at their fingertips. So the backlog is certainly a really key player in this. And I hit on this a little bit, but if you are using this kind of branch-specific strategy, you're afforded the opportunity to be pushing releases by branch and not by batch. And the great thing about this is for two primary reasons. First and foremost, the release size is substantially smaller. So the changes are happening more frequently, and they're isolated, so that if something ever goes wrong, you can isolate an issue a lot faster. If you do things in batch, it's a lot harder to trace those issues, but if you're using classical server environments like dev, stage, and prod, you have to do things in batch because you don't have enough environment to be working, with a team that's doing a ton of work in parallel. So bear in mind that if you are using this type of a strategy, not only are you getting, you're having a better testing process for having environments that are created branch by branch, but then you are deploying things substantially faster and smaller so that you're limiting risk. Integrate, integrate, integrate. So the whole key of continuous learning processes is basically to make sure that you use a set of tools that are really flexible and very easily able to be integrated, because you may learn about things that you want to do in your DevOps process moving forward, and you need to make sure those tools support it. So the more that the more robust that the tools are that you select, the better the opportunity it is for you to learn ongoing what you want and be able to do it. And so the key of this slide is integrate, 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 right? And so in this process, we want to make sure that you're doing as much integration as possible, because that's really the key. You can integrate Jenkins, you can integrate your development environments, your code repository, Slack, Jira, whatever your ticketing system is. You can integrate practically everything. And I would encourage you to think like that, because every system that's being used pretty much today, every modern system, has support for some level of integration, whether it's an API or a web service hook or something that you can use. It's pretty much doing it. So be mindful of that. I think you'll have to get creative, but this is how you do it. And so we have the idea of awesome outcomes. So what are some awesome outcomes that we could have here to make all of this stuff really, really shine? Well, first and foremost, we talked about putting these QA steps in, and most backlogs are organized by user stories. Like, as a content editor, I want to be able to move my content from draft mode to needs review mode, right? And that user story has, if we follow the conventions I recommended, a set of quality assurance steps, and it has an environment. But whenever it's all said and done, when the ticket moves into done and it's been tested and vetted, you can generate a report right from Jira that has a user guide of all of your different user stories and quality assurance steps that can be a how-to guide for how to use your entire site, right? Pretty cool. Elastic Cloud. So I get a little bit nervous whenever I see some companies who offer fixed environments, but they say that they're on the cloud. That's a little bit misleading. If you can't really support, the power or leverage the power of the cloud. But in the description that I described about creating environments and destroying them, you have an extremely beneficial elastic cloud architecture that isn't fixed like dev, stage, or prod. So I really believe you're actually leveraging, if you use this branch level strategy, you're leveraging the full capabilities of the cloud, the scalability, the rapid provisioning, and as we call it, the elasticity. So that elasticity happens through provisioning, and then all of the automation tools that we talked about, like Ansible or Puppet or Chef, really make that a lot easier to then rapidly spin things up and have it be consistent and work for you. I feel like it solves a lot of problems. Which leads me directly to my next point: containers and provisioning automation. So containers like container technology like Kubernetes and Docker have really kind of changed the game in terms of this disposable architecture. The disposable architecture on the cloud and the provisioning, would work fine. But if you imagine having to build an entire environment over and over again, that could be pretty slow, right? Containers tend to change that pretty drastically by using these images and things that are already pre-baked, and they can spin up instances of those images very, very quickly and rapidly. And you could even go and build on them by using something like Ansible or Puppet or Chef that can go and change a provisioned image or whatever to go and create a wildly quick, fast, and robust container-driven infrastructure that really leverages the cloud, in my opinion, in a very strong way. Here's kind of at a high level a diagram. I found it on the web, and I replaced one of the one of the things with Ansible in here. But if you kind of picture all of this, you have these code repositories that are working. You have a series of a Docker Hub instance and Docker Compose. Jenkins is sitting somewhere in there, and it's basically rapidly spinning up these different containers that are configured and automated that are for your own use, whether that's smoke testing, peer testing, client sign off. That inevitably could be rolled into a larger production instance or what have you. But everything really works really well because most of these systems have a lot of APIs or different ways that they can be integrated. The cloud, Amazon Web Services and cloud different instances have a lot of APIs for provisioning and whatnot. So these things are all baked in and are totally at the ready for you to extend and grow and evolve. And all of this can be can work in the same environment I described about using branches and being triggered by Jenkins, which is great. Lastly, Slack integration. So people don't want to be really using tons of technical systems unless if you're a technical person. So if you really want to try to tear down the walls and get people involved, have Slack involved as kind of a user-friendly interface for doing some of these operations and some of this work. It can perform really anything. Slack has custom commands that you can write, and Jenkins can be invoked from a Slack command. So you can wire all of these tools together that basically can show you what environments you have open right now, what branches haven't been deleted. It can show you how to spin up a new environment from a branch. All of these can be done through Slack with parameters for commands. And it's extremely great. You don't even need to leave, chatting with your team to do it. So I would really recommend it. And that was totally awesome. So very cool stuff, I think, that is on the horizon here. If you start exploring container technology and all these other things like Ansible, branch level deployments, the cloud, so on and so on. So that's my talk. I tried to keep it really brief, but thank you very much. Really appreciate it.